The slave market on Zephyr Station was crowded that morning. Hundreds of buyers moved between cages, examining the beings inside like they were looking at furniture. The air smelled bad, a mix of too many species packed into one place without enough ventilation. Voices echoed off the metal walls as traders shouted about their inventory and buyers haggled over prices. In the largest cage at the back of the platform, Kessa sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. Even sitting she was massive. Her scales were supposed to be green, the beautiful jade color that all Drachner were known for. But months of poor care had turned them dull and gray. Her horns, which should have curved elegantly like her people's, seemed too big on her oversized head. She had stopped listening to the insults weeks ago. Too big. Defective. Mistake. Waste of space. The words all blended together after a while. All right, settle down. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the speakers. He was a Velian, his purple skin shining under the harsh lights. Next item is lot 742. Drachner female, 23 standard cycles old. 2 guards opened her cage. One of them jabbed her with a prod. Get up. Move. Kessa stood slowly. She had to bend almost in half to fit through the doorway. When she stepped onto the auction platform, she heard the crowd react. Some gasped. Others laughed. A few made disgusted sounds. Now, I know what you're all thinking, the auctioneer said with a nervous smile. This one has a significant genetic variation. She's about 3 times the normal size for her species. That's an understatement, someone yelled from the crowd. What am I supposed to do with something that big? Another buyer shouted. She'd eat a month's worth of food in a week. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Yes, well, she does require more resources. But look at that muscle structure. This female could do the work of multiple laborers. Think of the savings on equipment and machinery. Silence. Nobody looked convinced. Kessa kept her eyes on the floor. This was always the worst part. Standing in front of everyone while they decided she was not worth their money. Her own family had done the same thing 6 months ago. They had looked at her with the same expression these strangers wore now. Disappointment. Disgust. Like she had chosen to be this way. Let's start the bidding at 1,000 credits, the auctioneer tried. Nobody moved. 700? Still nothing. 500 credits. That's practically giving her away, folks. A Corthan in the front row sneered. I wouldn't pay 500 to haul that thing off the station. Kessa's claws scraped against the metal platform. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Just get through this. Someone would buy her eventually. They always did. Then it would be more work, more insults, more reminders that she was born wrong. 400 credits, the auctioneer said. His smile was gone now. Someone must need heavy labor. 300, a voice called out. And that's generous. I'll take her for 200, another buyer said. It was a Krellin with cold eyes. I run a hunting preserve. She'd make excellent bait for the big game. Something that size would attract the really valuable predators. Kessa's stomach turned. She had heard of those places. Living creatures chained up in forests while rich people paid to hunt dangerous animals. Most of the bait did not survive. 200 credits, the auctioneer said quickly. Going once. 10,000 credits. The entire hall went quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. A human stood near the back of the crowd with his hand raised. He was not tall, not for his species anyway. He wore old brown pants and a jacket that had been patched several times. His hair was starting to turn gray at the temples, and his face had lines around the eyes and mouth. The kind of lines that came from smiling, not frowning. I'm sorry, the auctioneer said slowly. Did you say 10,000? That's correct, the human said. He walked forward through the crowd. People moved aside to let him pass. 10,000 credits for complete freedom papers, a full medical examination, and all necessary transport clearance documents. The auctioneer stared at him. Sir, I think perhaps you don't understand what you're bidding on. This specimen has significant physical abnormalities. She requires specialized accommodation and... I understand perfectly well, the human interrupted. His voice was calm but firm. 10,000 credits. Do we have a deal or should I take my business to one of your competitors? The auctioneer's expression changed instantly. 10,000 credits was more than he would make on the next 20 sales combined. Sold. To the human gentleman for 10,000 credits. The crowd erupted in confused whispers. Kessa stood frozen on the platform trying to understand what had just happened. Why would anyone pay that much? What did this human want from her that was worth such an enormous sum? The human approached the platform. Even though Kessa was hunched over, she still towered above him by several feet. He looked up at her with those strange human eyes. Brown like earth. Not cold or cruel. Just calm. "My name is Paul Grant," he said. "I captain a freight ship called the Terra's Promise. I could use someone with your strength on my crew if you're willing. But first, let's get you out of this place." Kessa wanted to speak, but her throat felt tight. She had not said more than a few words in weeks. What was there to say anyway? "Thank you for buying me? What do you really want from me? When will you realize what a mistake you made?" Paul seemed to understand her silence. He nodded once and turned to the auctioneer. "Let's handle the paperwork." It took almost an hour to process everything. Paul paid the credits without hesitation, signed the documents, and requested the medical scan be done at a proper facility instead of the station's dirty examination room. The auctioneer did not argue. He just kept smiling and counting his unexpected profit. Finally they left the auction house. Kessa followed Paul through the station's corridors, her footsteps heavy on the metal floors. Other people stared as they passed, but Paul ignored them completely. He walked with purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going. They reached a docking bay where a ship waited. It was old, probably older than Kessa. The hull had been repaired many times, patches of different colored metal visible across the surface. But it looked solid. Well maintained. The name Terra's Promise was painted near the airlock in simple letters. "Here we are," Paul said. He pressed his hand against the entrance panel. The airlock door hissed open. "Welcome to your new home. If you want it to be, that is." Kessa stared at the open doorway. At the human who had just spent a fortune on her freedom. At the ship that somehow felt less threatening than any place she had been in months. She still did not understand why. But for the first time since her family had sold her, Kessa felt something besides despair. She felt curious. Kessa stepped through the airlock but stopped just inside. Her body was tense, ready to fight or run. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. Kindness was always a trap. Paul walked ahead of her into the ship's corridor. "The crew is probably in the common area," he said over his shoulder. "I'll introduce you." The hallway was narrow for Kessa. She had to duck her head and turn her shoulders sideways to fit. This was normal. Everything in the galaxy was built for smaller beings. She had learned to make herself as compact as possible, to take up less space, to apologize with her body language for simply existing. They entered a larger room where three other beings looked up from their tasks. A blue-skinned Trellan female sat at a computer console. A Chishian male with 4 arms was organizing supply crates. A young human woman was drinking something hot from a metal cup. "Everyone, this is Kessa," Paul said simply. "She's joining the crew." The Trellan stood and walked over. She was small, barely reaching Kessa's waist. But her smile seemed genuine. "I'm Sarah. I handle navigation and communications. Welcome aboard." The Chishian waved 2 of his arms. "Greg. Engineering and cargo management." The young human woman raised her cup in greeting. "Annie. I cook, clean, and fix things that break. Which is everything on this old boat." She grinned at Paul, who just shook his head with a small smile. None of them looked afraid. None of them made disgusted faces or stepped back from her. Kessa did not know what to do with that. "I'll show you where you'll stay," Paul said. He led her deeper into the ship, past more narrow corridors and through the cargo bay. It was huge, designed to hold massive containers. But in one corner, someone had built a separate living space using cargo walls and privacy screens. Inside was a sleeping platform reinforced with extra metal supports. Storage containers lined one wall. A small round window looked out into space. Everything was larger than standard size. Built for someone like her. "I know it's not fancy," Paul said. "But the structure can handle your weight. There's a washing station just outside that should fit you. If you need anything modified, just tell me." Kessa stared at the space. Then at Paul. "Where are the chains?" Paul frowned. "Chains? For sleeping. Or working. Where do you want them attached?" Her voice came out rough, hostile. Better to sound angry than afraid. Understanding crossed Paul's face. "There are no chains, Kessa. You're not a prisoner here." "Then what am I?" "A crew member. If you choose to be." Paul leaned against the doorframe. "Look, I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm just some human you met an hour ago. So here's what's going to happen. You can stay in this space. Eat in the galley whenever you want. The crew will leave you alone unless you want company. After we leave this station, I'll explain the work we do. If you want to join us, great. If not, I'll drop you at the next major station with enough credits to start over." "Why?" The word burst out of Kessa before she could stop it. Why did you pay so much? What do you want? Paul was quiet for a moment. I needed crew. You looked like you needed out. Seemed like good timing. 10,000 credits for good timing? 10,000 credits because that's what it cost to buy your freedom papers, Paul said. Would you have preferred I let that Krellin get you for 200? The one who wanted to use you as bait. Kessa's claws flexed. No, she definitely would not have preferred that. Get some rest, Paul said. We leave in 3 hours. Food is in the galley, second door on the left. He walked away, leaving Kessa alone in her new space. She did not sleep for the first 2 days. She sat in her corner, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. Waiting for Paul to show his real intentions. But nothing happened. The ship jumped to hyperspace and started traveling to the next system. The crew went about their work. Nobody bothered her. On the 3rd day, her stomach finally forced her to leave her space. She crept through the cargo bay and found the galley. It was empty. On the counter sat several sealed containers with her name written on them in simple letters. She opened one. Food. Real food, not the nutrient paste they fed slaves. Cooked meat, vegetables, something that smelled like bread. She ate standing up, ready to run if anyone appeared. But nobody came. This pattern continued. Food appeared. Nobody demanded anything. Sarah once waved at her in the corridor but did not try to start a conversation. Greg nodded when they passed each other in the cargo bay. Annie left a clean towel outside the washing station with a small note that said, "Thought you might need this." On the 5th day, Kessa could not take it anymore. She found Paul in the ship's small bridge, reviewing navigation charts. "Why did you buy me?" she demanded. Paul looked up from his work. "We covered this already." "No. Tell me the truth. Nobody pays 10,000 credits out of kindness. What do you really want?" Paul set down his data pad and turned to face her fully. "All right. The truth. I've been running cargo for 15 years. In that time, I've seen every kind of being in this galaxy treated like garbage because they didn't fit someone's idea of normal. Too big, too small, wrong color, wrong species, wrong abilities. And you know what I learned?" Kessa said nothing. "The problem is never the person," Paul continued. "It's everyone else's limited thinking. You're not too big, Kessa. You're exactly the size you're supposed to be. The galaxy's perspective is what's broken, not you. That's easy to say when you're not the one being sold at auction," Kessa said bitterly. "You're right. I can't understand what that feels like." Paul stood up. "But I can choose not to participate in a system that treats people like objects. I can choose to see value where others see defects. And I can offer someone a chance to decide their own future instead of having it decided for them. You still haven't told me what you want from me." "I want you to live your life however you choose," Paul said. "If that includes working on this ship, then I'll pay you standard crew wages for your labor. If it doesn't, then I'll help you find a place where you can be safe and respected. That's it. That's all I want." Kessa studied his face looking for the lie. But those brown eyes remained steady. "Honest. I don't understand you," she finally said. Paul smiled slightly. "That's fair. I don't always understand humans either." He gestured to the viewport where stars streaked past in hyperspace. "We've got a cargo run to Station Meridian. Takes about 2 weeks. Plenty of time to figure things out." Kessa stood there for a long moment. Then she nodded once and left the bridge. That night, for the first time since boarding the Terra's Promise, she fell asleep without waiting for the cruelty to begin. On the 7th day, Kessa decided to work. Not because she owed Paul anything. Not because she felt forced. But because sitting in her corner doing nothing was slowly driving her crazy. She found Greg in the cargo bay, struggling with a massive container. He was using all 4 of his arms and a mechanical lift, but the container was not moving. It was stuck against another piece of cargo, wedged in at a bad angle. "Need help?" Kessa asked. Greg looked up, surprised. "That would be great, actually. This thing weighs about 2 tons and I can't get the right leverage." Kessa walked over and examined the problem. The container was huge, easily 8 feet tall. For most beings, it would take special equipment to move. But for her, it was just heavy, not impossible. She gripped the sides of the container with her clawed hands and lifted. Her muscles strained, but the container rose off the ground. She turned carefully and set it down in the correct position. Greg stared at her. "That would have taken me an hour with the equipment." Kessa shrugged. "I'm big. Might as well use it." Word spread quickly. By that afternoon, Paul asked if she wanted to help with the rest of the cargo reorganization. Kessa agreed. For the first time in her life, her size was helpful instead of shameful. She moved containers that would have required expensive machinery. She reached high storage areas without needing ladders. She secured cargo that would have taken 3 workers to handle. When they finished, Paul paid her a day's wages. Actual credits transferred to her personal account. Money she had earned through work, not slavery. "You did good today," Paul said. "If you want to keep working, there's plenty more to do." Kessa nodded. "I'll work." Over the next week, she fell into a routine. She helped with cargo loading and unloading. She maintained the equipment in the bay. She even started talking more with the crew. Sarah taught her how to play a card game. Annie showed her how to cook basic meals. Greg discussed engine modifications and actually listened to her suggestions. For the first time since her family had rejected her, Kessa felt useful, valued, almost normal. Then they arrived at Outpost 7. The outpost was small, barely more than a refueling station and trading post at the edge of explored space. They docked to pick up a cargo load and restock supplies. Paul, Sarah, and Annie went to meet with the station master. Greg stayed on the ship to monitor the fuel transfer. Kessa was organizing the cargo bay. She heard the explosion first. A loud bang that shook the ship. Then alarms started blaring. Greg's voice came through the communication system. "We're under attack. Pirates breached the station airlock." Kessa ran toward the main corridor. Through the windows, she could see armed figures moving through the station toward their docking port. 6 of them, maybe 7, carrying weapons and wearing mismatched armor. She reached the airlock just as 3 pirates forced their way through. They were Krellin, the same species as the buyer who had wanted her for bait. They carried plasma rifles and shock batons. The first pirate saw her and laughed. "What is that? Some kind of pack animal?" "Forget it, just stun the thing," another said, raising his rifle. Kessa moved faster than they expected. Her massive hand grabbed the rifle and crushed it before the pirate could fire. She threw him backward into his companions, all 3 of them crashing into the airlock wall. More pirates poured through the door. Kessa realized they were not just after cargo. They wanted the ship itself. And anyone inside would be killed or sold. She planted herself in the corridor, her body filling the entire width. "You're not getting through." A plasma bolt hit her shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, but her thick scales absorbed most of the impact. Another bolt hit her arm. Then her chest. She roared, a deep sound that made the metal walls vibrate. The pirates hesitated. They had expected an easy target, not a mountain of muscle and rage that would not fall down. Kessa grabbed the edges of the corridor and braced herself. When the pirates tried to rush past her, she used her bulk to physically block them. Her claws swiped out, knocking weapons from hands. Her tail, thick as a tree trunk, swept their legs out from under them. One pirate got past her guard and ran deeper into the ship. Kessa heard Greg shout. She turned, desperate, and saw the pirate aiming at the Chixian. She moved. Her body crashed through the corridor like a boulder, covering the distance in seconds. She grabbed the pirate with both hands and threw him back toward the airlock, where he collided with 3 more attackers. "Greg, get to the bridge and seal it," she shouted. "But you. Go." More plasma fire hit her. Her scales were cracking now, blood seeping through in places. But she did not move. Could not move. If she let them through, they would kill her crew. Her friends. Her family. A pirate tried to climb over her. She grabbed him by the leg and slammed him into the floor. Another tried to go under. She dropped her full weight, crushing him against the ground until he stopped moving. Then she heard Paul's voice from behind the pirates. "Drop your weapons or I start shooting." The pirates turned. Paul, Sarah, and Annie had returned through the station, armed with whatever they could find. Station security was with them, finally responding to the attack. The pirates ran. The ones who could still walk anyway. In less than a minute, the corridor was clear except for the groaning bodies of those too injured to flee. Kessa slumped against the wall, her strength finally giving out. Her scales were burned in a dozen places. Blood dripped onto the floor. Everything hurt. Paul ran to her. "Kessa, stay with me." "Annie, get the medical kit." "I'm okay," Kessa managed to say. "Is everyone else okay?" "Everyone's fine because of you," Sarah said, her bioluminescence flickering with emotion. "You saved us." Greg placed one of his hands on her arm carefully. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Over the next 2 days, Kessa healed. Her species recovered quickly from injuries, another benefit of her thick scales. The crew took turns sitting with her, telling her stories, bringing her food. They treated her like she mattered. On the 3rd day, Paul visited her in the cargo bay. He sat on a crate near her sleeping platform. "I've been thinking about what happened," he said quietly. "The way you fought. The way you protected everyone without hesitation." Kessa waited. You were never too large, Kessa, Paul continued. The galaxy was just too small to appreciate what you are. Strong, brave, loyal. Those pirates learned what I already knew. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Kessa felt something warm in her chest. Not pain from the injuries. Something else. Something good. Thank you, she said. For seeing me. Paul smiled. Thank you for being worth seeing. 3 weeks after the pirate attack, Kessa was checking cargo manifests when Sarah called her to the bridge. Her voice sounded urgent through the communication system. Kessa, you need to see this. Now. Kessa made her way through the ship, her footsteps heavy with concern. When she entered the bridge, the entire crew was gathered around the main display screen. A news broadcast was playing. The Krell Dominion has declared war on the Drakner homeworld, the reporter was saying. Military analysts say the Drakner defense fleet is severely outnumbered. The Krell army is expected to reach Drakner within 2 weeks. Kessa's blood went cold. Her homeworld. Her people. The family that had rejected her, yes, but still her people. The screen showed images of Krell warships gathering at the border. Hundreds of them. The Krell were known for their brutality. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They conquered and enslaved. The Drakner High Council has requested aid from the Galactic Union, the reporter continued. But with ongoing conflicts in other sectors, military support is unlikely to arrive in time. Paul turned off the display. The bridge was silent. I have to go, Kessa said quietly. I have to help them. They sold you, Annie said, anger in her voice. They treated you like you were worthless. Why would you help them? Because they're still my people, Kessa said. Because children will die if the Krell invade. Because despite everything, I can't just let them face this alone. Paul nodded slowly. Then we go with you. Kessa stared at him. What? You're part of this crew now, Paul said. Which means your fight is our fight. We go together. Paul, this is war, Kessa said. Real war. Not pirates or smugglers. The Krell Dominion will kill all of you without a second thought. Probably, Greg said with a shrug. But we're still going. Sarah stepped forward. You saved our lives, Kessa. Multiple times. We're not letting you face this alone. Besides, Annie added with a grim smile, someone needs to keep you from doing anything too stupid and heroic. Kessa felt her throat tighten. These people, this crew, were willing to fly into a war zone for her. For someone who had been called worthless her entire life. Thank you, she whispered. Paul set the navigation course for Drakner. We'll arrive in 5 days if we push the engines. Everyone prep for combat conditions. Greg, I need every weapon system we have operational. Sarah, send a message ahead that we're coming to help. The next 5 days passed in tense preparation. They modified the ship's shields. They armed themselves with whatever weapons they could acquire. Kessa trained with the crew, teaching them basic combat moves and how to handle themselves in a fight. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Drakner, Kessa's heart sank. Her homeworld was beautiful, covered in forests and mountains and crystal-clear oceans. But surrounding it was a blockade of Drakner defense ships, and beyond them, the Krell fleet waited like a dark cloud. Incoming transmission, Sarah said. It's from the Planetary Defense Command. A Drakner male appeared on the screen. He was elegant and refined, everything Kessa was not. His scales were perfect jade green, his horns curved gracefully. When he saw Kessa, his expression twisted with disgust. What is this? He demanded. Why is that defect here? Paul stepped into view of the camera. This defect, as you call her, is part of my crew. We're here to help defend your world. We don't need help from outcasts and their human pets, the Drakner officer sneered. Leave our system immediately. Your fleet is outnumbered 3-1, Paul said calmly. Pride won't save your people when the Krell start bombing your cities. We will handle our own defense. We don't need. The communication cut off as alarms suddenly blared across all channels. Sarah's hands flew across her console. The Krell are moving, she shouted. They're attacking now, 2 days ahead of schedule. Through the viewport, they watched the Krell fleet surge forward. Massive warships, hundreds of them, pushing through the Drakner defensive line like it was made of paper. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as Drakner ships fought and died. They're breaking through toward the planet, Greg said, his voice tight. The Krell are sending landing craft to the surface. Paul looked at Kessa. Your call. We can still leave. Kessa watched her homeworld below. Somewhere down there was her family. The siblings who had whispered about her behind her back. The parents who had looked at her with shame. The community that had celebrated when she was finally sold away. But also, children who had done nothing wrong. Innocent people who did not deserve to be enslaved by the Krell. We go down, Kessa said. Land near the capital city. That's where they'll hit first. Paul nodded. Everyone hold on. This is going to be rough. The Terra's Promise dove toward the planet's surface, dodging debris from destroyed ships and incoming fire from Krell fighters. Sarah piloted with skill that Kessa had never fully appreciated before, weaving through chaos with precision. They landed in a plaza near the capital's central district. The city was already in panic. Drakner civilians ran through the streets trying to reach shelters. In the distance, Kessa could hear explosions and weapons fire. The crew armed themselves and left the ship. The plaza was filled with Drakner defense forces, trying to organize a response. Many of them stopped and stared when they saw Kessa. A female officer approached, her armor marked with command insignia. She looked at Kessa with barely concealed horror, then at Paul and the crew. Who are you people? She demanded. Reinforcements, Paul said simply. Where do you need us? We don't need help from. Another explosion much closer this time. A building 3 blocks away collapsed in flames. Through the smoke, Kessa could see them coming. Krell soldiers, dozens of them, wearing heavy armor and carrying massive weapons. Behind them came war machines, mechanical walkers that stood 3 stories tall. The Drakner officer's face went pale. Fall back. Everyone fall back to secondary positions. But there was no time. The Krell were already in the plaza, their weapons firing indiscriminately. Drakner soldiers fell, their elegant armor no match for Krell firepower. Kessa looked at Paul. He looked back at her and nodded once. Let's show them what we can do, he said. Kessa stepped forward, placing herself between the Krell advance and the retreating Drakner forces. She spread her arms wide, her massive body filling the plaza entrance. If you want them, she roared at the Krell army, you'll have to go through me first. The Krell accepted her challenge and charged forward. The real battle was about to begin. The first Krell soldier reached Kessa and swung a shock baton at her head. She caught his arm mid-swing and threw him into 3 more soldiers behind him. They went down in a tangle of armor and weapons. More came. They always did. The Krell fought like machines, never stopping, never afraid. But Kessa had something they did not. She had a reason to fight beyond orders and conquest. She was protecting people who had rejected her, yes, but also innocent lives that did not deserve this violence. A plasma bolt hit her shoulder. Another struck her leg. The pain was intense, but she had felt worse during the pirate attack. Her scales absorbed most of the damage. She roared and charged into the Krell line, using her bulk as a weapon. Soldiers flew backward as she crashed through them. Behind her, she heard Paul's voice. Greg, left flank. Sarah, target those war machines. Annie, cover fire. The crew had taken positions behind overturned vehicles and broken walls. They were not soldiers, but they fought like they were. Paul fired precise shots that took down Krell officers. Greg used a heavy weapon he had modified himself, the blast strong enough to damage Krell armor. Sarah and Annie worked together, coordinating their fire to maximum effect. But it was not enough. More Krell poured into the plaza. And behind them came the war machines, mechanical walkers with weapons mounted on every surface. Each one stood as tall as a building and was armored thick enough to withstand most conventional weapons. One of the walkers targeted the crew's position. Its cannon charged with a high-pitched whine. Kessa moved without thinking. She ran and leaped, her massive body slamming into the walker's leg joint. The machine stumbled, its shot going wide and hitting an empty building instead. Kessa grabbed the leg with both hands and pulled with all her strength. Metal screamed. The joint bent, then snapped. The war machine toppled sideways and crashed into the plaza, sending up clouds of dust and debris. The Krell soldiers stopped advancing. For the first time, Kessa saw hesitation in their movements. They had expected an easy victory, not a giant Drakner who could tear apart their war machines with her bare hands. Push forward. Paul shouted to the Drakner defense forces who had stopped retreating to watch. While they're confused, push forward. The Drakner soldiers rallied. Inspired by Kessa's impossible feat, they charged back into the fight. The plaza became a chaotic battle, both sides fighting for control of every inch. Kessa faced another war machine. This one was ready for her, its weapons tracking her movement. She dodged left as plasma bolts tore up the ground where she had been standing. She grabbed a piece of broken wall, a chunk of stone and metal bigger than most beings, and threw it at the machine's sensor cluster. The impact blinded it temporarily. Kessa closed the distance and climbed up its armored body. The machine thrashed, trying to shake her off, but her claws found purchase in the metal plating. She reached the top and ripped open the control housing, tearing out circuits and power cables with her clawed hands. The war machine went still and collapsed. She looked across the plaza and her blood went cold. A third war machine had gotten past the defensive line. It was heading straight for a shelter where civilians were hiding. Mostly children and elderly Drachner who could not fight. Kessa ran. Her injuries screamed in protest, but she pushed her body harder. She had to reach the shelter first. Had to stop that machine before it killed everyone inside. She reached it just as the war machine raised its cannon toward the shelter entrance. Without hesitation, Kessa put herself between the weapon and the doorway. She spread her arms wide, her body covering as much of the entrance as possible. "Fire at me," she roared at the machine. "I'm right here." The war machine's sensors locked onto her. The cannon charged. Kessa closed her eyes and thought of the crew. Of Paul, who had seen her worth when no one else did. Of Sarah, Greg, and Annie, who had become her family. She hoped they would forgive her for this. The cannon fired. But the blast never hit her. At the last second, multiple shots struck the war machine from different angles. Its armor shattered, and the cannon exploded before it could release its full charge. The machine collapsed in a heap of smoking metal. Kessa opened her eyes and turned. The entire Drachner defense force was there, dozens of soldiers all with their weapons aimed at where the war machine had stood. They had fired together to save her. The Drachner officer from earlier lowered her weapon. She looked at Kessa with an expression that was no longer disgust. It was respect. Maybe even awe. "Thank you," the officer said quietly. "You saved them. You saved all of us." More Drachner reinforcements arrived from the outer districts. With the 3 war machines destroyed and their advance broken, the Krell forces began to retreat. The battle was not over, but the capital was secure. The people were safe. Kessa collapsed to her knees, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Paul and the crew rushed over. "You did it," Paul said, his voice full of emotion. "You actually did it." Over the next hour, more Drachner leaders arrived at the plaza. The High Council, the ones who made the laws and decided who was acceptable and who was not. They approached Kessa where she sat catching her breath. The eldest council member, a female with silver scales and ancient eyes, bowed her head slightly. "We were wrong about you. We measured worth by appearance rather than character. You have proven yourself a hero of Drachner." Another council member stepped forward. "We would like to offer you a place of honor among our people. A home here, recognition, everything you were denied before." Kessa looked at them. These were the leaders who had allowed her to be sold. Who had created the society that rejected anyone different. She felt no anger toward them now, only a strange sense of distance. "I already have a home," she said simply. She stood and walked back to where the crew waited. Paul smiled at her approach. "Ready to leave?" he asked. "More than ready," Kessa said. They walked together back to the Terrace Promise. Drachner citizens lined the streets, many bowing as Kessa passed. Children stared at her with wonder instead of fear. It was everything she had wanted when she was younger. But it did not feel like home anymore. As they boarded the ship, Annie put a hand on Kessa's arm. "You could have stayed. They were offering you everything." "They were offering me what I used to want," Kessa said. "But I already have what I need." The ship's engines started up. Sarah guided them away from the planet's surface, back toward the stars. Kessa stood at the viewport and watched Drachner shrink behind them. "Any regrets?" Paul asked, coming to stand beside her. Kessa thought about it. About the family that had sold her. About the people who had finally accepted her only after she had proven her worth through violence. About the home that had never really been home. "No regrets," she said. "I found my family. They're right here on this ship." Paul nodded. "Where to next?" "Anywhere," Kessa said. "As long as it's with all of you." The Terrace Promise jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward whatever adventure waited next. And for the first time in her life, Kessa knew exactly where she belonged.